Hello everybody, good afternoon and welcome to another episode of Live at the Waterhole, where first up we're at the wonderful Tau Lodge in the Madikwe Game Reserve of the Northwest Province of South Africa. My name is Ralph Kirsten, and what does the bush hold in store for us today? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax and watch as the animals come down to quench their thirst and cool off. And as per usual, please don't forget that this is a live and interactive experience, so we'd love for you to jump on board with us and send us through your questions and your comments. You can do that by going on the WildEarth website and registering. You can also join the conversation on X, formerly known as Twitter, using the hashtag WildEarth as it appears on your screen. What is it that you'd like to see? What would you like to chat about? Whatever it is, wildlife related, send it on through. And we're watching the best fly swatters out there. Well, I would say maybe only giraffe that beat them with those tails of theirs, swishing and keeping the parasites away from their backsides. Looks like a nice sunny day. Doesn't seem to be too much wind going for now, but that does bode well for us. Lots of animals probably come down to the waterholes. These zebra, nice and calm, are probably part of the same harem. Just having a little bit of a greeting there between those two. And it sounds like once again the little blue waxbills and the chin-spot batters are here somewhere near to the camera, probably in the thickets. Tiny little birds. I always find it such contrasting behavior with zebra towards each other. They can be so loving and kind, and at other times they can be terrible to each other, biting and kicking. Seems like it's nice and hot though, so they're all a little bit lethargic. So now obviously quite different to the likes of the wildebeest, who would have to spend time ruminating. Being hindgut fermenters, they don't need to spend time doing as such. So in this kind of instance, I think they're just relaxing, maybe taking the heat of the day to get a bit of shut-eye. Just a game viewer heading through there, probably between lodges. Maybe going to pick up some of the guests and new arrivals. And first comment coming through from Joanne Mello saying happy Monday, WildEarth and Ralph. Happy Monday straight back at you, Joanne. Lovely to have you on board once again. And Serena Basanti saying hello from Massachusetts. Welcome aboard, all the way from the Northern Hemisphere. Lovely to have you with us. All right, so nice little relaxed start here at Tau, but I think we're going to change of place and we'll leave these sleepy zebra for now, and let's head on over to the Greater Kruger Park and Cat Eye. With a lovely little breeding herd. Such a wonderful perspective, this camera, as well as Oldonyo in Kenya, are probably a couple of my favorites. Just because of the angle, and we're nearly at ground level, looking up at them. Just a wonderful perspective. So what do we have here? We've got a couple of little youngsters, and then it seems like 3 females potentially. So we just changed up of place. We've headed on over to Djuma in the Sabi Sands, still in the Greater Kruger Park. I'm sure we'll head back to see those elephants at some stage if they don't wander off. You see some Impala there, just off on the left. It's getting some shade, similar to what the zebra are doing, just relaxing. However, the zebra not too concerned with heading into the shade, as the Impala generally do. Is that a Nyala hiding in the bushes there? Looks like it. Looks like there might be a couple of them. Really hidden there in the shade. In fact, more than 2, maybe even 3. Very well camouflaged. Almost the same color as the shade. So, coming from Asbo, saying good afternoon, Ralph, from the east coast of the UK. Still cold, but at least sunny for a change. Good to hear that you've got some sunshine and you can get some vitamin D, Asbo. And good afternoon to you. Lovely to have you on board once again. So then there was a question coming in from Lenny. Thanks, Lenny, asking why are some hindgut and some are not? So, Lenny, this was a sort of a split within the animals around about 50 million years or so ago. And hindgut fermenters have sort of moved onto the open plains, and they're grazers eating grass predominantly. And so the likes of elephant and rhino and hippos and warthogs all sort of falling into this category with a rather simple digestive system. It's like a fermentation process. It's not very efficient, and the animals that remained more so in the forests and in the thickets, became more so the ruminants. But they sort of form part of about 6 different families, and very much like cows, so all the bovidae, they chew the cud, as we speak of, with cows, and they've got 4 different stomachs, and so it's a little bit more of an intricate system and a lot more efficient than the hindgut fermenters. But they do need to spend a lot of time actually processing their food. So, and those 4 different stomachs, the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum, each one with a different function. And in the rumen, that is where we call the ruminating process takes place, where they first bite off the leaves, and they can be mixed feeders like Impala are, either bits of grass and some leaves, and then they chew it, they swallow it, and then they regurgitate it, chew and swallow, and it's obviously just refining that food, breaking it down, getting it mixed with saliva, and then it passes on through into the other stomachs or chambers and gets processed even further. So with that being more efficient, they don't have to spend as much time physically feeding, but they do need to spend that time actually digesting, which is the periods when you often see all the ruminants. They do need to go and lie up. You often think they're just resting, but they're going through that arduous task of actually chewing the food that they've gathered in their mouths and processing it. Whereas the hindgut fermenters, they need to spend more time feeding, actively feeding, and moving around and finding that food because they pass a lot more as a result of the inefficiency of their digestive system. And so you could almost see that a little bit of the animals that are more so on the move, out in the open, those are the hindgut fermenters, and the ruminants, sometimes sticking around a bit more, being a bit more territorial, and so their digestion also reflects that in quite a lot of ways. So Spaz Lankov saying very quiet at Juma today, Ralph. Yeah, Spaz, you can find sometimes, as you would have been watching, and you've been around and been watching Juma for many years, as I know. During the heat of the day like this, it's generally when there is less activity, and we can expect not really to see any predators, especially if it's lovely and hot. And they generally rest up during those times, and that's why often you find the prey species, or the game as we call it, sort of also taking that time to rest up, because they've got to be on their toes, especially during the cooler and darker hours where they've got to constantly look over their shoulder. So it's a good time now, with the inactivity or relative inactivity of the predators, to also catch a bit of a snooze. And Ramon Nava saying hello everyone from New York City. Wow, we really got an international audience once again. Lovely to have you all with us. As we see this beautiful Nyala bull now just sauntering off. Nyala, also one of the best indicators of predators if they're around. They've got a booming bark alarm call. So when you hear that, it's a very good indication to head into that area. You're going to find yourself a predator. Them and the kudu and bushbuck are probably, for me, three of the best indicators of predators. All right, so it's a little bit quiet here, Juma, so I think we're going to change of place, and this time it's a new one for me, and let's head on over to Jabulani. So still in the greater Kruger area. Lovely spot this. And a wallowing buffalo. Most likely a Dugger boy, as we call him. And he's showing why we call them Dugger boys. If you didn't know, a lot of our regular viewers would know. We explain this quite regularly, but that doesn't mean that we don't need to explain it anymore, because we always have new viewers, and we always need to look at the bush through the eyes of a new viewer. And so when we call these older male buffalo Dugger boys, it's actually from the Zulu word daga, which is what they used to use with a mix of cow dung and mud and clay. And they use it for building material. So that is called daga, and this mud that the buffaloes, they roll in and it sticks to them, it obviously reflects that kind of building material. So that's why we call them Dugger boys. It's the older bulls that have been left behind by the herd, and sometimes they form little small bachelor herds. Sometimes they go off on their own, but they try to sort of group together if there are a few of them around. It does help for safety against lions in particular, because they are susceptible now that they don't have the extra eyes and ears of the greater herd. You know, as they get old, they get arthritic and they get sore in their muscles and in their bones, and so they can't keep up with the herd, and this is why they then land up sort of hanging around a particular area, a particular waterhole where there is some feed close by, some good grazing, and then spending a lot of the time in these kind of muddy wallows. And it does help because they've also had quite a bit of hair loss, so their skin is exposed, and so they sort of cover themselves in this mud. And spending many hours doing this. And us, when we go out on foot, we need to be extra vigilant, especially around waterholes and where there are mud wallows, where there could be any of these Dugger boys lying around, because it's very easy to walk almost right on top of them. They're not as aware as they would have been when they were younger, so they only pick you up very late as well. And if you know the kind of behavior of buffalo, they can be very tricky, especially when they're old like this, because it's either fight or flight. But once they get past a certain age, they pretty much just turn to fight. So if you surprise a buffalo like this, they can very often charge at you. So it's very important to listen out for any indicators, especially like red-billed oxpeckers that will be sitting on them, and just be extra vigilant, especially when you come to a waterhole like this, not to surprise a Dugger boy wallowing in the mud. You might get yourself into trouble. And you can actually see this Dagga boy buffalo doing exactly what I was speaking of earlier. He's ruminating. He's chewing the cud. You'll see him chew, 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 and then stop for a while as he swallows it down. And then a few seconds later, it will be regurgitated back into his mouth for some more chewing and additional saliva. And I don't see this buffalo going anywhere anytime soon. And another reason why they actually hang around these waterholes, and also another reason why they get left behind by the herd, is because as they age, they sort of require, once they get to this older age, they require softer feed for their mouths and their digestive system, etc. So they tend to hang around these lovely, lush, swampy areas where there's nice soft feed as well as nice wallowing spots for them. So it's all combined factors that lead to them hanging around these waterholes. So Deborah Cosby says, WildEarth is wonderful to wake up to, and wondering where you are in the world, Deborah, but lovely to have you on board. And then Dark Mane Lover says, Ralph, how do animals distinguish who is a safe animal to be around with, like for instance, drinking together at a waterhole without worrying about attack on them? So Dark Mane Lover, welcome aboard once again. It's I think it's down to evolution. And a lot of it is learned behavior from their parents. So when they are born, they mimic the adults and their parents in particular. So when they come to a waterhole and they're very skittish of the water, of course, the little babies will copy this. They mimic their parents. So, that's where we see the difference of the animals here in the Greater Kruger Park, which are all very much used to waterholes and rivers that have crocodiles in them, for instance, as one predator and one danger that may eat them at a waterhole. So they've all learnt from their parents, and the constant behavior of being very nervous and edgy and skittish around the water, so they copy that. And if you look at the likes of Etosha National Park, where they've lost the fear of water because there's been thousands of years with no crocodiles in that area, they're not scared of the water at all. But they learn that from their parents. The parents walk into the water, and so the babies have no fear either. And so they do the same. And when they react to different animals, like leopard, lions, hyenas, not as much so, and jackals, even to a lesser degree, but they mimic that as well. So it's all this learned behavior that they then sort of pass down through the generations. And if you go into a reserve where there hasn't been predators, or that they were taken out a long time ago, you see the animals very relaxed. You see them all lying down a lot more. You see them, just being, the disposition being a lot more calm. And so the babies will copy that. But if you had to throw predators onto that reserve, and we've even seen it on the likes of our Impala Game Reserve, where they released the Three Amigo cheetah coalition, male coalition, on the northern territories, where for a long time there hadn't been any big predators there, bar the brown hyena. But the brown hyena, not really an active hunter as much as the cheetah would be. And initially the animals were almost shocked. They almost didn't run away from the cheetah, and so the cheetah, had a very big impact. But within a very short space of time, those herds of animals very quickly became active, more alert, more anxious, more nervous, a lot more alarm calling. And so now the babies that are coming through will start to learn this from the adults that have obviously been through a difficult period because they were very relaxed. Now the predators have been introduced. Now suddenly they've got to be running and looking over their shoulder. But the babies then learn from this behavior. They copy them, they mimic them. And even if you had to take those predators off there, you'll probably find that it will take maybe 2 or even 3 generations for those animals to start calming down again. So it doesn't just happen overnight. And it's very much a learned behavior from the animals to understand where they must be careful, where they must be nervous, where they must look out for predators. And very often it does take for quite a few animals to be killed by the particular predator for them to start to realize that it's a real danger. Now, just something to mention is a grand tour hosted by our naturalists, old and new, at Pangwe Safari Lodge and Chitwa, and this will take place between 16 November and 23 November of this year, 2024. There's only 8 spots available and bookings are open on the 3rd of May. So safari like no other with your favorite characters, and take a filming masterclass with Lauren and Davy, and experience also a rhino dehorning. So very interesting, and I think you can find that all out on the WildEarth website as well. So go and take a look at the grand tour. Right, so now spending time with this ruminating Dugger boy with all his mud all over him. But like I said, it's pretty much like watching lions during the day. They're not really going to be doing too much. So with that being said, I think it's time to change of place, and let's go back to Madikwe Game Reserve and Tau. Where we're joined by some elephants now. I wonder if it's a couple of bulls. Probably is. This one in the foreground, I think definitely is. Often these solitary guys just coming to enjoy the waterhole. They do like this lovely lush greenery in the waterhole as well. And they very often go for a lovely splash and a mud wallow. So let's see what happens. Shaking a little bit of the dust off of his head as he comes. He looks like he needs a good bath. little black-winged stilt just to the left of that elephant, and behind it there's a couple of them. There's also an Egyptian goose, and there's the resident moorhens and coots. So Deborah Cosby is saying, don't they use the mud as protection? I'm sure you're referring to the Duggar boy, the buffalo. So yes, in some ways, Deborah, I think it just feels nice on one side. I think it helps them cool off. But also, like I mentioned, as they age, they also get quite a bit of hair loss on their rumps. So it's nice to cover it with a bit of mud. It does give them some protection from the sun as well, cools them off. And I think it also does help with parasites as well, caking them in, and then they go for a scratch on a nice post and get rid of them that way as well. Yeah, he's decided he's going in. Slippy slidey in the mud. Not much wind about. The water is almost like a mirror. Beautiful. And Sandy Franklin, 69, welcome aboard. And saying it's so sad that rhinos have to be dehorned. Yeah, I have to agree with you, Sandy Franklin. It's a shame to see rhinos without their horns. But yeah, if it does assist in trying to alleviate the absolute scourge that is the rhino poaching. But I think maybe a small sacrifice, at least, if they are able to then, stem the flow of the rhino horns. So yeah, I think it is terrible, but it is what it is. And then Ants saying, aren't there crocodiles in these waters? There are indeed, Ants. I think there's at least 5 adult crocodiles. Elephants, especially big bulls like this, don't really concern themselves too much about crocodiles. As you can imagine, I think a crocodile would struggle to pull down a big elephant like this. And in the meantime, I think the elephant could probably kill it. So it's only baby elephant that the herds really worry about when there are crocodiles about. We have seen in the likes of the Masai Mara, where the elephants do cross the river a lot, and there's also massive crocodiles, probably the biggest crocodiles that I've ever seen. And a lot of elephants without any tails, and obvious that, with wounds on them as well. And I think a lot of crocodiles actually grab onto the elephants' tails as they're sort of swimming through the water. And I think that's why there are a lot of elephants there with no tails. Some have half tails, some have got no tails. But this is the time that I spent there, around 6 months, that I noticed so many of them. And I haven't seen this anywhere else. And I don't have any other answer to it other than crocodiles trying to grab them as they're swimming through the river. Oh, another individual coming to join. It's the Old Boys Club. So Lenny was asking, is it really dehorning or horn trimming? And that's referring to the rhinos. So Lenny, yeah, you're quite right in that it is in fact horn trimming, but it is termed dehorning. That's how they speak of it. And they have to do it about every 2 years on the rhinos because it regrows, very much like your hair and nails. And there's no pain inflicted on the rhino itself. It's cut off with a saw, sometimes with a chainsaw or whatever else that they have. They normally have vets on site as well, and they do all sorts of other checking and all sorts of tests on the rhino when they put it out, because they have to, and check their collars or whatever it might be. So they use that as an opportunity for all sorts of tests on those particular individuals when they do it. Now, I know it's controversial, but I never steer away from that, and I think it's important to have these discussions. When we say that they dehorn them every 2 years or they trim their horns, this is in aid of trying to deter rhino poachers, that when they see the rhino, they see it doesn't have a horn, they leave it alone. There's a couple of things that are disadvantageous to this. Sometimes the rhino poachers kill those rhinos regardless, and still dig out the base of the horn. There could still be a couple of kilos in there. And the last I checked, it was something upwards or in the area of around $70,000 per kilogram, making it one of the most valuable items on the planet. So, you know, it makes a lot of sense for them if they're going to be going for that. If you look at it purely from an economical perspective and the risk that they're taking, they kill it and they dig out that inside anyway. Sometimes it does deter them. We've seen it on different game reserves working. We've seen it on other game reserves not working, where, as I say, they kill them anyway so that they don't follow the same rhino again, and, you know, there's that little bit remaining. Now, with that being said, I have to refer to the controversial fellow, John Hume, who was the largest private owner of rhino on the planet. And he had over 200 white rhino that he was farming pretty much like cattle. And the conditions were obviously not optimal, not a wild setting, but it wasn't a bad setting. The animals were still healthy and living in, getting good food, and they had good security, etc. And rhinos, white rhino, they're quite comfortable like this. So he took the South African government to court because of this law that made it illegal for him to trade with what he termed a sustainable resource. And he won the case that rhino horn is a sustainable resource and it is not cruel to them, and you can literally supply a market that has a very high demand and potentially even then help with the rhino poaching scourge. Now, the government took that ruling on appeal, and I think is where it is still sitting. As a result, he's sort of lost so much money in the protection and the security of those rhinos that he basically became bankrupt and he wasn't able to pay for them anymore. So I think he sold the farm, or he put it up for auction. And I think there was a couple of groups that bought it from him. I think WWF might have been involved, and they're going to relocate those rhinos to wild reserves once again. Now, the only problem I have with that is that they're potentially going to be in more dangerous situations and being more prone to being poached. And his case has still not been denied. He won. So he proved that rhino horn is a sustainable resource without having to be cruel to the animals. So he wanted to be able to release the stocks of South African rhino horns, and that they could flood the market, and they could then sustain the market with farmed rhino. There could be a massive economical input for conservation, both for the rhino as a species, as well as bigger areas at large. So I was quite confused as to the reason why the government appealed this. And as I say, I'm not shy of controversy. You have to look at all the potential reasons why the government appealed it. Were they looking after the well-being of the animal? Were they looking after the well-being of the market and the black market? Were there any nefarious reasons behind this? We can't rule out any of them. And we also can't rule out that there's government officials that are involved in rhino poaching. So all of this needs to be taken into consideration. And in my mind, I still think that I'm pro John Hume and the way that he was going. But if you've got different thoughts, please don't shoot me. It's an open debate, and that's what this is all about with wildlife. So send through your opinions on this, and let's have a chat about it. But I've given you my opinion, and then we'll see yours. So now that I've opened a lovely controversial subject and we've got lots to talk about, I think we'll change of place and let's head back to Cat Eye. So we've got a beautiful Kudu bull that's just having a drink out of that water trough there. What a lovely antelope Kudu are. So Jenna from the UK asking, hello Ralph, I know the horns of some antelope can be invaded by a particular bug. Can this happen in an elephant's tusk? So Jenna, I've never seen the keratinous or the keratin moth. It's the only creature or organism that actually feeds on keratin here in Africa. I'm not sure if there are in other parts of the world, but I've never seen it happen on a living antelope, on a living animal with horns that are still healthy. Only once they die do they then start to infest those horns. And you're quite correct. You don't see this in elephants' tusks because they're not horns. They're literally modified teeth. So their makeup is completely different, and tusks are a lot more dense. And as we know, one of the most difficult things to digest. That's why very often, even fire, teeth very often even evade fire. And that's why they use dental structure to identify people that have been burnt. So I think it's even more difficult for animals to penetrate into the teeth themselves, and to digest them is a different thing altogether. The only thing that I know that digests teeth are hyenas. So I always used to say to my guests that if you want to get rid of somebody, you need to feed them with no trace. You need to feed them to hyenas, because it comes out everything is digested without a trace. You won't be able to even know that that person existed. Now, I'm not giving anybody any ideas. But it's incredible, the digestive system of a hyena, and the acid levels must be extreme for them to be able to digest teeth. So never seen tusks, even after decades of being stored, be digested by anything. And I've been in quite a few stock rooms where, because you have to mark and tag elephant tusks, and it needs to go into a national database. When I was game reserve manager of a reserve down in the Eastern Cape, we had a couple of elephants that died. One killed another one, and another one died of natural causes. And we had to mark those tusks. We had to lock them away in the safe, and then we had to get the sandparks officials around to come and check that the numbers reflected and marked on the tusks, and then they put that into their database, and then it just sits. So both that and rhino horn needs the same attention, and those stocks are just piling up. So what are we to do with them? So it looks like the kudu's now left the area. We've got a Meves or long-tailed starling there. No, the kudu hasn't left just yet. Just feeding there in that bush. Then he's horning this bush here. He's also marking it. Quite territorial. And they've got a pre-orbital gland. Maybe wiping that on the bush and then spreading it around with his horns. All right, so lovely watching this kudu, but I think it's time for us to go and have a look what has been happening at this waterhole overnight. Now, this is a leopard, if you didn't know. It's a dead giveaway, but this apparently is the Rosie's female. So normally moving around here between Cat Eye and Rosie's Pan. Just having a drink. Not sure what time of the night this was. But there we can see lovely stretch. But there's a problem with the foot. How that happened is anybody's guess. Has it been a run-in with another leopard? Has it been while trying to take out something like a warthog or, in the act of hunting? It's just marking there a little bit. But that foot is obviously very tender. I hope it's going to be all right. They are very resilient, are these predators. And you'll be surprised how well they heal. We wish her all the best. So you see, all sorts happens at these water holes. You just got to be around there to see it. But at least we can bring you the highlights of what's happened overnight. Alrighty, so lovely little encounters here at Cat Eye, never disappoints, but I think let's change of place completely and let's go down to the tip of Africa and Stony Point. Now, who do we have here? With the fancy feet. Those lovely bright yellow feet. This is a little egret. And what they use those different colored toes for is they actually, when they stand in the mud, they wriggle them around almost like a little worm. And then the fish come in to catch the worm. And then they catch the fish. So their feet are literally artificial bait for catching fish. It just disappeared in behind the rock there. Oh, there's a Dussie photobombing. One of the closest relatives to the elephant. See that egret just mixing in there through the kelp. I find Dussies or rock hyraxes extremely weird looking in the face. Just a little bit out of focus there. You can see the little egret doing its thing in the background. And the hyrax doing what they do best, relaxing pretty much 95% of the time. So they're very good at it. So Mercedes Bean saying, as we're watching this little egret do its thing, and now you can see its feet nice and clearly, and why we call them fancy feet. Mercedes Bean saying, unfortunately, I feel this issue is never going to be resolved. Mercedes Bean, I think without a drastic change, I think you're quite right. I don't think it will be. And that's why I sort of feel that there should be some kind of drastic measure taken, even if it just, what we are doing isn't working. Now, there's been less rhino poaching around the country in the last little while, and it's been celebrated by sand parks, but in my mind, it's because there's less rhino to kill. There's a lot of parts in the Kruger Park that you used to drive through, and you couldn't drive 2 or 3 kilometers without seeing a white rhino. Now, you go into those same parts in the southern part of the Kruger Park, and you struggle to find one in a 2-week period. There is really a depopulation of the rhinos there. So something's got to give. In my mind, what we're doing is not working. Sandy Franklin, 69, saying, I think there could be some genius in farming and flooding the market as a way of destroying the black market. Well, Sandy Franklin, that's what I pretty much thought John Hume was. He was a genius, and I got my numbers wrong. He didn't have over 200 rhinos. He had over 2,000 rhinos. So in that way, he proved the case that it's sustainable and you could flood the market, and I think we should have at least tried. But the argument will come that flooding the market will fuel the market, and then there will be a bigger demand. Well, there's only one way to find out, and if we continue producing them, we could use that money to pump back into conservation. That is my opinion, and it is only my opinion. It's not the opinion of WildEarth or anybody else. So I'll keep it at that. And it's an open opinion, and I'm open to debate as well. Then Lenny saying, very complicated, Ralph, as it always is, managing human versus animal conflict. But I agree with you about what John was doing. And that's from Phoenix in Arizona, USA. And I think it's important also to note that he had these 2,000 rhino on a 7,800 hectare property in the northwest. And what I think is going to happen is that this farm that he had was bought up by a couple of NGOs. I think it was African Parks and another one. So they're going to rewild them. But what's going to happen to those rhino? Are the poachers just licking their lips because now there's more rhinos for them to kill? That's the question. Are we going to kill the black market? Not the way we're going, because the price remains high because it's illegal. If we look at drugs, it's a very similar thing that is being peddled here. It's an illegal substance, being the rhino horn, but you could term it as cocaine or heroin. In Holland, where it's been made legal and controlled and taxed, they have one of the least amount of drug abuse on the planet. And it's open, taxed, legal. They have less health issues because people are able to get help. And I think you could almost apply that with rhino poaching as well. As long as it's illegal, we have government officials that we know are involved in rhino poaching and assisting them, sometimes even part of the plans. They're taking a lot of money in the black market, and the price remains high because of it. So if they had to make it legal as opposed to illegal, you're probably going to drop the price of the rhino because it's now freely available, and you won't have people making as much money. And if you had to speak to a lot of drug dealers, I can guarantee you that they prefer to keep those drugs on the black market. If you make it legal, the price drops, and they're not going to make any money. They're going to move on to something else, probably into rhino horn, if they haven't already. So my perspective is, and I know a lot of game reserves around South Africa, owners, stakeholders, agree with me, but they would never say it publicly. And I've been in these meetings behind closed doors. They would not agree with it publicly, even though they are pro rhino horn dealing. They won't say it publicly because of the public perception, and then people won't visit them anymore. So therein lies the problem. I think it's public perception that is the biggest problem and the biggest hinder to changing the legislation. I think we need to open it up. But like I said, that's just my opinion. You know, and it goes as far as to people not even wanting to have rhino on their properties anymore because it creates a security threat, and it starts luring nefarious and bad people to their reserves, and then they need to put out a lot of money to protect those rhino. And so it just is almost a problem for them. And so nobody really wants to have rhino, especially, you know, and they're not expanding the population as a result of it because of all the money that it takes to protect them. And then you have these armed gangsters that are going to be coming looking for your rhino. So it's a security risk as well from that perspective. And I think that could change if the legislation was. So a nice little stop in here, seeing the hyrax and the cormorant off on the left there with the kelp forest and that beautiful little egret with its fancy feet. But let's change of place, and this time let's head all the way up to Kenya and Oldonyo. Nice, where we've got a lovely little troop of yellow baboons, and I'm hoping they're going to stick around and we can spend some time with them. They're just doing a bit of allo grooming. Some grooming themselves, some sitting in the thinking pose. Always comical are baboons. I could sit and watch them all day. So it looks like I'm not going to get my wish. Something's disturbed them and they've all scuttled off. Slowly making their way back in, and you see how they need to drink, but quite awkwardly, getting their mouth all the way down to the water. See the one little youngster there riding jockey style on its mom's back. You can tell that they're a little bit older when they are at that stage, because normally they're attached to her nipple and hanging underneath her. And as they age a little bit, then they start taking on that jockey style. Right, now that we're watching baboons, we also have another little highlight clip that we'd like to show you. Not at the same place, but all the same, very interesting. So this was in the Greater Kruger, and we've seen this before. They like to sleep in these fig trees just on the bank of the river. Look at this little baby, fast asleep. Looks like quite an awkward position. Shame, Mom trying to hold it up. Looks like it's going to fall over backwards. She might go with it. But how cute is that? And back in Old Donyo with a different species of baboon. That was a Chakma baboon, mom and baby, sleeping in that tree overnight. And these are yellow baboons of Kenya. So you can very easily also tell the females from the males in that the female's backside very pink, very swollen, almost wound-like, as we can see this individual here. The males, they just have more of a sort of a brown or a bare patch, and the females have this kind of structure on their back end. Here it comes, looking like a nice big male on the right hand side. Remembering that the social structure of baboons is an oligarchy. So there's a group or a gang of males that rule the troop with an iron fist. Oh, that little one wanted to jump on Mom's back, but she was having none of it. So something else I'd like to mention is that from the 7th of May, WildEarth will be going live every Tuesday for YouTube members and explorers only. So make sure not to miss out on our Tuesday sunrise and sunset safaris, and become a member of YouTube or an explorer on the WildEarth website if you don't want to miss out. So Deborah Cosby was asking when is their mating season? Well, baboons don't have any set mating season, Deborah. They're very much like a lot of the primates, that they will mate all year. And because they mate throughout the year, the females are not likely to be fertile at the same time of year. So males are actually then able to monopolize the mating opportunities with a single female through consortship behavior and also mate guarding. And then a couple of fun facts about yellow baboons. Their top speed, they can reach up to about 28 miles per hour. Which is about 45 kilometers an hour, which is pretty fast. And their scientific name, cyanocephalus, is a combination of Greek words, kainos, which means dog, and kephalikos, which means head. So its scientific name literally means dog head, which likely draws the inspiration from their long muzzles and obviously their four legs and the stance that they take. And just going back to that, when a female comes onto heat, she swells around that wound-like structure on her rear end. And in the period that she's coming into heat, she will be mated by any male that comes across her. But as soon as she has reached full cycle, the dominant male will keep all the other males away from her and only mate himself. So it's quite interesting. And in their gestation period, it's around about 180 days. And they're more likely to produce every other year than annually. So pretty much every 2 years that the females will give birth. I am so glad that these baboons have decided to stick around for a little while. Always lovely to watch them. So Spaz Lankov was asking, interesting that the social grouping of baboons is called oligarchy. Is it the same in other primates as well? Good question, Spaz. And the social structure, and this is according to the Palomar College, which has got a lovely little write-up on the social structure of primates. And they say that most primates, including humans, spend their lives in large social groups or communities. And in the case of semi-terrestrial species such as baboons, being in a large community helps provide protection against predatory cats, dogs, and hyenas. It also helps protect scarce food resources. This is especially true for non-human primates when the food is fruit. Leaf eaters such as colobus monkeys and langurs tend to form smaller social groupings since there's little competition for their food. The very few nocturnal species of primates are mostly small, relatively solitary hunters. There are exceptions to these general patterns. For instance, the vegetarian orangutans lead mostly solitary lives except for mothers with their children before they go off on their own. And most non-human primate communities are more or less close contact with members of other communities. Most often they are tied to a particular locale and rarely migrate outside of their home range. There's a nice big male. The aloofness from other troops prevents high concentrations of individuals which could result in rapid depletion of local resources. So communities usually avoid each other and are aggressive towards outsiders. As a result, social interactions between members of different troops are usually very rare, especially for females. Chimpanzees are a notable exception. When chimpanzees from different troops come together, there's often an exciting, friendly encounter lasting several hours, following which some of the adult females switch groups. Apparently, they are seeking new mates. Occasionally, however, contact between communities of the comparatively unpredictable chimpanzees will develop into genocidal violence. Interactions within non-human primate communities are usually limited. Subgroups are rarely closed from group interaction. All members of a community have daily face-to-face casual communication, and the most common type of subgroup consists of a mother and her young offspring. In some forest-living primates, contact between groups of the same species is in the form of a specialized territorial defense behavior. Instead of avoiding each other, groups actively converge near their common territorial border and make hostile displays. Howler monkeys, indries, siamungs, and gibbons all produce exceptionally loud vocalizations for this purpose. This is a ritualized, essentially harmless form of aggression that is intended to intimidate members of the neighboring community. All four of these species live in home ranges that are usually so small that the food resources of neighboring territories can be seen and then thus becomes attractive. So when it comes to baboons, it's pretty much an oligarchy. With monkeys, it's a little bit more spread between the males and the females. No, it's not so much a band of males. But with all the baboons that we have in Africa, they're all sort of run by this oligarchy and maybe limited to the more terrestrial of the primates. And I think that could also be as a result or evolved from the problem that they have of big predators, lions, leopards, wild dogs. And so with the big males forming together and banding together, they become a very, big defensive unit. And so I think that then extends into their social structure as well, with them, protecting the group. They then become the protectors. They also then become the enforcers as well. So I think with the more terrestrial of the primates, it's a little bit different, where they're not having to protect themselves constantly from these big predators and the likes that we have in Africa. And so I think then the social structure is a little bit more fair between the sexes, if I can say that. And the playful nature of these youngsters is just infectious. So Deborah Cosby saying, I learned so much on this channel. Thank you so much. You're very welcome, Deborah. And we can't but help just spread the word of our natural heritage of Africa, and lovely that you're enjoying it. See that one little youngster on the left is very young, still wobbly on its feet. I would say it can't be more than a few days old. And there he goes back to mom. And obviously all sorts of different communication, vocal communication from baboons. Oh, that one's got his tail straight up. And grabbed one of the babies there. Now you can also watch the body language, but the different communications is often just little soft calling, contact calling between them. Everything's fine, all is well. Sometimes when they have disputes within the troop, you can hear very high-pitched squeals, almost like one of them is being murdered. But it's generally a more dominant, mostly male, that is disciplining a subordinate, male or females, and then they squeal like that, and that also does show their subordination to the more dominant individual. And then they've got these sort of very loud booming barks as well, that they do, and that's more of an alarm call. It can be alarming at predators. It can be they often do it even when we walk through the bush. They bark at us, and they can also bark at rival troops. So it might be another group, and as I was chatting about previously with the primates, they will fight between each other. So they won't be welcoming to another troop of baboons. They will bark at each other. They'll be very aggressive. They'll posture and sometimes even fight with each other as well. And that's when those gangs of males will get into a sort of gang warfare between each other if they're coming into each other's territories. So you wouldn't say that they're territorial per se, but they do defend their home range and the resources that they remain in. So it's a bit of a quandary because, like I say, they don't really mark their territories, but they will sort of defend the resources within their home range. Right, so lovely to spend time here with these baboons at Old Donyo, but let's change of country, change of place. Let's head to Zimbabwe and Vic Falls. So a bit of birding. We've got a yellow-billed stork. We've got a great egret, much bigger than that little egret that we had at Stony Point. Looks like we've got a black egret just behind this yellow-billed stork. He's been a resident here. He does that shadow hunting. And then there's a reed cormorant up in the tree, and I think another egret off on the right there. Either that or a stork of sorts. I can't quite make out just yet. So the great egret, very much like a grey heron in the way that they hunt. They look very similar from the neck up in terms of the shape of their head and that very spear-like bill of theirs, stabbing for the fish. Fish, frogs, tadpoles, whatever they can get their spear into. Could this be another little egret, or is it an intermediate egret? Then we would have seen almost all of them today. I think it's a little egret with its fancy feet. So Lady Macbeth saying, nice selection of waders. Yeah, sure is. And all the stilts and long legs. That's for sure. Oh, and a marabou stork, 2, 3 in the foreground here. The Undertakers. I think there's a couple of ibises there. I'm just trying to work out if it's hardy-dar ibis or a different one. Maybe a glossy ibis, but I think it might be a hardy-dar. So you pretty much can't come to Vic Falls without hearing helicopters, if you were wondering. It's obviously a very popular activity to see the largest waterfall on the planet from the sky, one of the 7 wonders of the world. So those helicopters are working pretty much from sunrise to sunset, and it's quite difficult to be in these parts without hearing a helicopter. So it's nothing nefarious, it's not any projects underway, it's just general tourists going to see from a bird's eye view the 7 wonders of the world. So, and I was hoping we were going to see that black egret doing its canopy feeding. I said earlier shadow feeding. It's actually canopy feeding. And what they do is the bird actually uses its wings to create an umbrella around its head, and then it picks off fish and tadpoles below. And this behavior may actually serve a dual purpose of preventing glare from the water, making it easier to see their prey, as well as tricking the prey into thinking that the shadow is a safe hiding place. They're also known to wiggle their toes, just like the fancy feet of the little egret, to attract fishy prey. But it's very interesting to watch. You see there? It makes that little circle, but I'm not sure. It's just doing a bit of preening now, so it's not actually hunting. Now, something also to mention is around the time change that we will be happening, and that's from the 2nd of May. So on the show on safari will be from 2:30 to 3 o'clock. The sunset safari will be from 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock, and live at the Waterhole will be from 12:30 until 2:30. So slight time changes there. Just to repeat, on safari 2:30 to 3 o'clock, sunset safari from 3 o'clock until 6 o'clock, and then live at the Waterhole from 12:30 until 2:30. Then from the 15th of May, the sunrise safari will be from 6:30 in the morning to 9:30, and sights and sounds will be from 9:30 until 11:30. So Jessica McBee asking, do birds also stay together for protection at waterholes? It's pretty much the same with all the animals out in the wild, Jessica McBee. They sort of learn from each other. You know, when they've got similar feeding habits, they will be in the same area around the same waterhole. They sort of understand from their learnings and from the behavior of the other birds which ones are dangerous, which ones may attack them. But then the rest of them, assist in being good early warning signs. So birds will fly off. That's normally the first thing they'll do. And that's an indication for birds to be alert and to look around, and then obviously decide if they want to fly off as well. There's a lot of alarm calls that will be made, and the birds understand which are alarm calls, which are not. And so they'll also react to that as well. So safety in numbers, regardless of species, if you're not one of the predators, is always an assistance for the animals, whether it's birds or mammals. Now, Ritz Paldora is saying, some years we have black storks that pass the Alps and have a chill on Lac de Neuchâtel. I think I got that right according to the spelling. Or along the fresh creeks here. Always a heartwarming moment. It's always interesting, the different birds that come through at different times of and seasons around the world. One of the things that I experienced when I was in France, in the south of France, I was there during the period of Le Mistral, this very famous wind that comes through those parts, very similar to the Cape Doctor of South Africa, but quite interesting in that in this one little mountainous region, there's the migration of a lot of predatory birds, so raptors, and they migrate during this period of very strong winds. And so to get through some of the crossings of the mountains and so on, they literally walk up the road. And they've actually set some chairs and almost like mini stadiums for people to go and respectfully go and sit and watch as these raptors walk up the road, because the wind's so strong that they can't fly over it. They need to walk up the mountain and up and over it. And then once they're on the other side, they can take off again. I found that astounding. It was so interesting, with all these massive birds walking up the road. And then they stopped the traffic and all of that, and it was just amazing to watch. So yeah, we have all sorts of wilderness interactions around the world, and it's just so fascinating. And thanks for sharing yours, Ritz Paldora. So there's a lot of big birds around here. There is the Vulture Restaurant, which is not far from here, the Victoria Falls Safari Lodge. They bring out a bit of a sort of snack, because there's so many of the birds, the white-backed vultures, the hooded vultures, the marabou storks. They all come in, and it's a bit of a feeding frenzy. They don't really get much of it, but everybody fights for a little piece. And it's just something to help tide things over for them, because they are heavily persecuted, not directly, mainly. Sometimes they are by poachers that poison the vultures, so because they're a dead giveaway. When they start to circle after the poachers have killed an animal, it's a good indication for the authorities that there's a dead animal, and then they can move into that area. So they poison the vultures so that they don't give them away. And then it's also indiscriminate poisoning from farmers trying to get rid of the predators that may be farming livestock. So this in some way just helps them to tie them over, but it doesn't change their feeding habits completely, because they don't get enough for them to be, to be sustained on just what they're getting fed there. So you see on the right hand side there's a blacksmith lapwing. Then just off to the left of it, that would be a little three-banded plover. Oh, hello. Was that a kingfisher? Looks like a pied kingfisher just bombed into the water. So in a three-banded plover, it's very much like the lapwings. It's just a miniature version. They used to all be plovers, but now they separated the little ones, which remained plovers, and the bigger ones became lapwings. There goes the pied kingfisher again. I think he was hovering. He went out of screen, but he must have just hovered upwards. So in a little moorhen, I just exited the water. All right, so lovely to do some birding here in Vic Falls, and nice to be in this part of Africa. But I think it's time to change of place. Let's head back to the northwest province of South Africa, just on the border of Botswana and Tau. Where our big elephant bulls are still hanging about. Getting a bit of a dust bath there. Getting it in under the belly, in behind the ears, all those vital spots. So Jan Mello saying thank you WildEarth and Ralph, really enjoyed the show, have a good Monday. Straight back at you Joanne, enjoy the rest of your day. Doc GL saying I love watching these waterholes, so much variety. It is wonderful indeed. Thanks for joining us, Doc GL. And those juvenile Egyptian geese are getting quite big. Adults have been successful, brought those youngsters through almost to adulthood. See the elephants now going down for a drink. We're slowly heading towards the end of the show. I hope you've all enjoyed the variety today and the different spots that we've been to. I think the highlight for me was seeing Rosie, the Rosie female at Cat Eye overnight. What was yours? Anyway, with that, I have to say thanks to all the viewers for joining us. And of course, thanks to the Wildlife for being the stars of the show. And of course, to the WildEarth team. You guys rock. Without all of you, this wouldn't be possible. So thanks to everybody. Don't forget that later on there will be the Sunset Safari. So don't go anywhere. Lots of action coming your way. All wildlife related, of course. Showing off the natural heritage of Africa. What a wonderful perspective we have had today. Join me again tomorrow, same time, same place. We'll be back live at the Waterholes. What will the bush have in store for us tomorrow? Well, you'll have to sit back, relax, and join me then. Well, that's it from me for now, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day. Give it horns. Bush greetings. Cheers.